What's up, everybody? We're talking about merchandising today on the Operators Podcast. It's episode 40. We got all four of us together. So I think 40 is it's the perfect number. It's right between how old I am and how old Jason is. It's right there in the middle. And we're going to go over all things merchandising. So shout out to Fulfill, our flagship sponsor. Sendlane, I am a customer. Today's my first day kicking off email blasts from Sendlane, and Northbeam. Let's jump into it.
Oh, come on, Sean. He's just Googling it. Keep that off camera.
What is merchandising?
What
Mike
is
is coming in hot today. Mike,
absolutely.
Who pissed in your coffee?
Nobody. Well, Sean apparently he's pulling a Yeti out.
I would never piss in a simple modern cup. All right, I would rather piss my pants.
I'll drink like this.
I know. You at least keep yours hidden until now. Stop that. Put it down.
Okay.
I woke up and chose violence. All right.
So today we're talking about merchandising. What is merchandising? Who does it? How can it actually help your store? I think merchandising is this big catch-all term that it comes from retail and the way you actually merchandise and display goods in physical settings, but it means so much more. It's what you buy. It's seasonality in your business. It's how you're displaying it throughout, everything. And I want to give a special shout out to digitally native Nate. You're going to see his Twitter right here. He started as a merchandiser, right? He was a chief merchant at a bunch of different companies. And I think we should run through what merchandising is on the smallest scale to the largest scale, because everyone, I think, falls into two camps. Either you don't do it at all and you've never heard this term, or it is so important to your business that it's like Facebook ads. And you're like, why the fuck are we talking about a day one basic thing? So,
and your example of so any fashion brand, anybody in apparel would be like, merchandising is almost church to them, right? It's everybody who's probably not in apparel that we're talking to, that this is likely not even in the vocabulary of the average D2C founder.
Yeah. Merchandising in the ABCs of, marketing or e-commerce or whatever, like merchandising is a basic practice for every fashion company. If you're doing seasonal drops, you know what a merchandising calendar is. I'll just talk about personal experience. Ridge had no idea. I didn't know what a merchant was. I didn't know what a merchant did. We didn't have line plans or seasonality in our business at all until about a year ago when I hired a chief merchant. And it has been responsible for at least 25% top line growth by just showing how to add newness and work through limited editions in our business. So
I mean, Mike, I'm assuming that you guys have line plans and that you do this a lot. Jason, I'm assuming the same with you guys. Like, your product catalog has grown quite a bit. Are both of you running a line planning process in your business?
Yeah. So with us, we are in a semi-fashion vertical, I would say. And honestly, Matt, Pillacase, Sean, Ridge, they're both fashionizing the way that they're going. And so if your goal is to bring in fresh ornamentations and to catch new trends, the problem with that is that if you're not really intentional about how you bring new things in, you create the equivalent of a traffic jam, where instead of having 10 things or 20 things for the customer to choose from in terms of ornamentations or styles, they have 50 things because you've got stuff that you didn't buy correctly and it came in and it's just kind of hung on for too long and new stuff stacked on top of it. Or you weren't thinking about, hey, what's the customer going to see? Instead, you just said, oh, those are 5 new great looks. Let's bring them in, and didn't think through all the ramifications. So we've made, I would say, probably just about every mistake you can make here, because in the early days, our thought was just more is better. And we're constantly looking for the next new thing that's going to drive excitement, that's going to bring people to the site. And pretty quickly, we went from having 5 colors that were available on Amazon to having 50 colors. In fact, we know that Amazon's swatches break basically, and it goes to a text drop down once you get over 45. And the reason we know that number is because we went over that number, and that visually it becomes a much worse experience for the customer. And so we spent a lot of time thinking about how does this present to the customer. As you mentioned, Matt, merchandising in a retail space has to do with discovery. It has to do with kind of curb appeal, and can you grab somebody's attention? Can you draw them in? Can you show them complementary things close to each other? All of those elements. In a digital setting, it looks a little bit different. It's about taking advantage of the endless shelf and the fact that you can actually have a lot of products contained within one listing. But how do you show that to a customer in a way that's appealing, where they're going to find something that really catches their eye, but also where it's shoppable? And doing that actually requires a lot of planning at the front end when you're buying inventory, when you're laying out a calendar, so that when you have the inventory, you can present it to them in the way that's going to be most effective. What we've developed is something we call lookbooks, which more or less are an ability to say, hey, in May of 2024, what should our Trek Tumblr listing look like to the customer? And it tries to take into account new things that are coming in, things that have gone away, and what the customer is going to actually see. So there's a lot of projecting of how inventory is going to move around and your buys and things like that, in order to try and get an idea ahead of time of what customers are going to see.
How much of that is driven by your business's, I guess, like depth and breadth in retail versus how much of it is driven by the fashionization of the category?
It's both. One of the things that's a universal truth is that every retailer wants to feel special, and they want to feel like you're giving them something that's unique to them and desirable to customers. They would love it if every brand was providing something that is appealing and potentially bring some of your customers into their store. So exclusives are the love language of Target and Walmart and the major retailers. For example, we're going into Whole Foods, and our first year, we're exclusively doing our Renew line, which is all recycled steel, in Whole Foods. And you can see, it's a good fit for the brand, and you can see why they would love to be able to say, hey, we're the exclusive provider of simple, modern Renew products. So that's part of it. And then another part of it is that I've been reading this book. It's a great thing to listen through on Audible or whatever if you're listening to this. It's called The Innovator's Solution. There's another one called The Innovator's Dilemma that's really famous. But one of the things he talks about in there that I think is fascinating is how in product categories, they generally, your product category or industry is broken into one of two camps. It's either the product is not yet good enough. Customers want more of it than the product is able to deliver, and the industry is trying to progress towards delivering that product. Or the product has already reached the good enough state, and that's clearly an insulated drinkware. That's where we're at. Is like everybody in the industry can make really good insulated drinkware. And then those tend to move towards speed and customization. So when you're in a product category, which is in the good enough category, then fashion, speed, customization, personalization, all these things start to dramatically matter when it comes to driving profit.
I think,
Jason, sorry, go ahead, Sean.
I just think we have to go to let's talk about all of our brands on a graph of merchandising. I would say Lomi and Hexclad do the least amount of merchandising. then it's me, then it's Pellet Case, then it's Mike. And merchandising does is it lets you build seasonality and newness into your business through ornamentation, through limited releases and whatever else. And what it's really good at is, what do you talk about on a Tuesday? Like random Tuesday in March, what are you going to message out, right? Merchandising helps you have something, so you're not just hitting the sale button to your customers over and over again. And it's required to be successful in wholesale. If you're big push for your business is going to be getting into wholesale. Why does Coke release seasonal flavors and colors? Why does Pepsi have 50 different types of Mountain Dew? It's because that's merchandising. It's a reason to buy that product again, a reason to go to the store, a reason to stand out on shelves that they were talking about. So there's the natural chart there. Lomi only has 2 versions, and you're phasing one out.
And we're one of them sunsetting, so we'll be at one soon.
And
but we'll have maybe 3 devices total, like in 3 years. Like it's going to be very little. Yeah,
3 devices total, maybe 3 colors. Okay.
Yeah,
and then Hexclad. Hexclad, you make the pan set, right? And it's like your merchandising is a different sizes of offering, right? So you can buy a 5, a 7, a 9, a 12 piece, whatever. There's no colors, there's no limited editions yet. But when you add that, you will see sales grow 25%, I think, right? And then you have Pillowcase, which you have to just make new patterns, and you're getting way more into the fashion industry, right?
Dude, we'll drop 400 designs this year.
Yeah. So maybe you actually take the cake as the most merchant-driven business. But what that is people want candy cane shit for Christmas. So like you're going to have a candy cane case, right? And you saw Mike do $1 million off a fucking spooky ghost for Halloween because people want spooky ghost. So that is a natural merchant-driven sales cycle where you wouldn't capture those sales without the merchandising aspect to it. And what merchants or what wholesalers expect is a merchant-driven strategy. Like when you go to Best Buy, they're like, what is your Q4 release? Because that's what we want. And then they're like, what is your Q1 release? It's got to be different. So you have to have that seasonality in your business to be successful in wholesale.
Mike, you probably do this with Costco too. Like you will have a different product channel strategy for Costco than what you guys are selling on hexclad.com. Not Mike, sorry, Jason. Ugh.
Yeah. Our merchandising is like Sean describes, is very minimal because we have probably, other than you, the fewest number of SKUs on the pod here. And to me, when I think of merchandising for us, it's really about, like you said, bundles, how we price, and then how we price across different sales channels. We don't have that many, but we do obviously have to bear in mind that we're selling on Costco and Costco.com. We're selling on Amazon. We're selling on Hexclad. We also are a few others. But merchandising for a D2C company, I think your website is merchandising. I think how your Amazon store is merchandising. It's just a different way of thinking about merchandising.
Am I the only one who caught Mike's thing that at 45 variants on Amazon, you flip from swatched? Do you think, Mike, somebody tested that? Or do you think that was just like highest paid person's like, fuck it. 45 sounds like the right number.
For sure. Somebody just threw in that constraint.
Like, why not 42?
One day. Why not? Yeah, there's like, I don't think there's a rhyme or reason behind it. And we've done a lot of research actually on the subject of, okay, at what point does optionality start to maybe be a net neutral or even a net negative for you? There's a lot of research on this, right? That the more options you throw at somebody, that it creates a kind of a decision fatigue and a mental overhead, and it can make them less likely to purchase. But we also know that if you only offer one color of shirt, you're going to sell less shirts. And that's part of merchandising, I think, is fundamentally a qualitative exercise where you're trying to use data and then your qualitative insights of your team to find the blend between offering an assortment and choice, but not offering too much so that you overwhelm.
I think that's a super important point. Like to me, growing up in a retail family, like the idea of a merchant or merchandising, that is the art of retail, right? And I find that when it gets too much into the science of retailing, that's where it goes wrong, right? It becomes like overly robotic. It's very numbers driven. And you can see, like if you go into physical retail where every square inch of the store has been put into a spreadsheet, you can see it and feel it. There's a very big difference between like that experience versus an in-store experience where like it is driven by somebody's taste and feel, right? Like it's the emotional side of commerce is what we're talking about.
Mike just made a good point. And this is something that Danny has been talking about for a long time. And I agree with him is there's such a thing as too much choice for customers. And we've always tried to like be really careful about that. And it was easy to be careful about it at one point because we just didn't have that many pieces in our line. Like through 2021, like we had so few pieces. We launched knives in February of 2022, I think.
Right.
And like, so for my first 2 years at HexClad, we had very few products. We had like a pot set, pan set, individual pans, wok, griddle, done. And now we've got like 3x, 4x the number of SKUs, which is still not a ton, but we do worry about too much
Yeah, how far is too
choice.
far? Did you see that image of Le Creuset, Jason, that had the big red, like everything, their whole, it was like one shot of every product they had all in red. It made me want to puke. I'm like, holy shit, that is a lot of red stuff. Like, who's buying all this, right? From one brand.
Okay, so we should go through the steps of merchandising. This is trying to give impactful knowledge to our listeners. It starts with the line plan. The line plan is what is in line and what is out of line. Yeah. Good merchandising removes as much as it adds, right? Because what Jason's talking about is, and we saw this at Ridge, if you continue to add new products, eventually you have too many products. You get to be Mike and you have 55 things in one Amazon listing, right? So there should be seasonal additions and seasonal removals. You have to keep a lean line plan, right? So that's step one, is what are you offering to this business? Step two is how are you presenting what you're offering in this business? And your website's a great example of that. You should have a good, better, best. You should have a flagship offer. That's what you're driving ad dollars around, right? Now, merchandising in a line plan lets you add newness to attract new people, right? Jason probably skews more male than the entire cooking industry, right? And it's because he has a more gender neutral brand than Our Place. Our Place is more female focused than he is. So he's let more people enter his brand by keeping it minimal. But let's say he wants to go after tech, right? He might have to do a special collab or something. That's getting more people into the brand through merchandising. And you can do that while still having a poignant offer, right? Go ahead, Matt.
So after the line plan, then what comes? Like, what do you guys think is the next step?
I think it's building campaigns around what you're offering. So, our example is we added the NFL to our line plan. That's 32 wallets. Then it's like, okay, so every time that there's a playoff game, we have to highlight the teams that are playing in an email and on our website and on our landing experience. So that is how we're presenting that, because we know that there's heightened interest in that. And then the Monday after the Super Bowl, NFL comes off the website because that is now out of line until kickoff season again, right? So it's, you build marketing campaigns and you messaging around what's in your line plan. That's step two, in my opinion. But what about you guys?
We do what Mike does. Like we build sort of like mood boards or like, I don't even know what to call them, mood boards. I mean, so like for every drop or every collection that we're going to drop, there is like a look and a feel. And like, this is sort of the messaging that we're going to do. That's usually like the second step on Peel a Case is like, what do we want to launch? What's the niche or the theme or the whatever? And then how do we envision it actually coming to life on site? And then in campaigns, we also tend to choose, we're starting to get better at this. We weren't at first, but like what does come out of line and what stays in and goes into like long tail search for Google, right? Because like, yeah, like your peak demand for NFL, like you would never merch that product on your homepage or like high on a collection page out of season. But like, why would you ever give up the handful of people that are searching for like, I don't even know the name of a football team. Pick a football team. That wallet, right? I'm sorry, guys. I don't watch the football.
Hey guys, we are so thrilled to have Sendlane as one of the sponsors of the podcast. Sendlane helps you to stay in direct contact with your customers via email and SMS. And as you know, owning your customer, having that direct relationship is the lifeblood of any digital brand. We have people on the podcast actively onboarding. I think Sean just this week started sending through Ridge some messages to customers through Sendlane. We've heard nothing but great feedback from the community because Sendlane is really customer centric. They are actively troubleshooting problems and actively engaging with the community to figure out how they can make their service even better. So in a time when it's more critical than ever before that you can speak directly with your customers and do it well and do it affordably, Sendlane is a fantastic option, and we're happy to have them as a sponsor.
So I think it's number one is choosing what is in line. Number two is choosing the messaging around that. And then I would say number three, which is an important point we should talk about because all of us make this decision is there's messaging and then there's presentation. I think step three is presentation. Mike's example of how many colors do you have on an Amazon listing? Like what's the right number? You know, you can
low 20s is where we've ended up. But yeah, I mean, I think you're exactly right. I just want to make one point so that we don't gloss over it because I don't know if we'll come back to it, which is there's a couple of pieces also like in stage one and the stages you're talking about, Sean. If you're omnichannel, you're actually kind of coming up with a line plan for every channel, right? And so that creates some additional complexity of it's not just like, here's what I'm standing for. It's like, here's what I'm standing for in Target. Here's what I'm standing for in Costco. Here's what I'm standing for on the website or on Amazon. And you have to balance what you're trying to do with each of those channels against that, which is a little bit of complexity. And then the other piece, and this is something that I'm seeing with retailers right now, is that I'm seeing retailers choose to have less items on the shelf because they want to funnel customers to fewer choices because it's easier to run the supply chain. So I just want to call out this trade-off that the cost of more is always higher inventory risk, which we talked about just a couple of weeks ago. That the more things you try, the more stuff's not going to work out, the more inefficient your supply chain is. And so I'm seeing major retailers make the decision of, if I can offer 250 things and get 1,000 sales, or if I can offer 180 things and get 95% as much in sales, like I'm going to take that because the inefficiency on the supply chain and inventory piece makes it not worth it to go get that extra few percent in sales. And that's the trade-off. The trade-off is there's always, Matt, to your point, there's always a long tail, right? Like, for example, if we offered a brown water bottle, I'm sure there's a few very interesting people that would want to buy it. There's just not many of them. And there's certainly not enough to warrant us offering it.
Camo. Got to do camo. And do like plaid for us Northerners.
Yeah.
Well, camo is a great example in that we've done some limited drops in camo and we've even done some of like the more alternative camos, but it's just not really our demographic.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, maybe it's not that you never do it, but it's not something that you stand for regularly. And so, but for Yeti should definitely have a camo. Like it makes sense for people that are, built for the wild, people that are going to be out there hunting. Like, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I think it's like there's assortment and categorization, which is what we've been talking about. So like, what are you selling and where? Then there is like everything beyond. So I see that as the top of the, like, or not even the top, the foundation of like, this is the merchandising pyramid, right? Then beyond that, it's like discoverability is a big one. D2C, we suck at on-site discoverability. Like we're limited to, we have less senses than what you have in a retail store to work with. So like how people discover and like people don't wander through our site. As much as we like to think that like we've all got beautiful shopping experiences, people tend to not do that. Like they come in through an ad or through a search and they're looking for something.
Do you guys think cross-sell? Do you guys think cross-sell is another function of merchandising?
Absolutely.
Because
Cross-sell,
I think
upsell,
it is.
That's like another brick. Personalization is another brick. I think that like how you price a product, Sean already hit on like good, better, and best. Like that could be both from a features and benefits and value to the customer, but also just straight up like pricing tiers, right? If you look at Ridge does a very good job of this. Like you can get a Ridge wallet for $120 and you can get one for $260. And that's probably like price and materials and whatever. But I promise you, I don't know Sean's margins, but they're not going to be very different from each of those products. Like the cost to make the product.
The cost, the margins are different. The
cost. Sorry, the margin's very different. So I think that like assortment is the base, and then what you do on top of that is sort of like that varies brand by brand, right? Like what Jason does, he has an assortment and a categorization, but then what he does is he's like using mostly bundles to create even more assortment and more optionality and that good, better, and best thing for customers.
Yeah. So I want to go back to like the steps someone can follow, right? Yep. So the first thing is figure out what you're going to fucking sell in a year. That is your line plan. That's what you're doing. Mm-hmm. Mike brought up a great step. That's 1.1 is figure out what you're offering where. We do not put everything on Amazon. We do not put everything on wholesale, right? Now, Jason's a great example of this. He's like, yep, we're going to have our 30 SKUs. Now, if Nordstrom's comes to him, maybe they're like, yeah, we want the black pans, but could you make a red pan just for us, right? Chinese New Year coming up 2025. We want to do a red set. He might do that and he might add it to the line plan, but it's not on Costco. It's not on Amazon. It's not on his website. It's an exclusive SMU, special markup unit, just for Nordstrom. So your line plan is your entire business and then where you're selling these things, right? I think it is very aware that that's a decision you make. Then you come up with the messaging around it. Like, why is Nordstrom getting something special? Why is Amazon this way? And then, Matt, step 3 is the discoverability, right? It's like, how are you actually showing people shit on your website? And is it sorted by price? Is it sorted by flagship offer? Like, how do you actually funnel people to what they actually want? And this is where, going back to line plan, the less you offer can be better, specifically getting into wholesale, right? Like if you bring 500 SKUs to a wholesaler, like you can have any of these, they won't order from you. They'll be like, that's too hard. It's not clean. I don't understand who this actually is for. You want to have a very tight line plan, then get into wholesale and then expand with them because everyone has an idea of what they want for your brand. Like Matt just pitched Mike camo, right? He's like, yeah, dude, you got to do camo. You got to do flannel.
Such a strong pitch.
Yeah. And Mike was like, we've tried it, not really for us. But if Matt was the buyer at Cabela's, you know what Mike would say? Oh yeah, dude, I'm going to give you 5 different types of camo just for you. It'll be great because that's what you need to do to build the relationship. Right. So it is, discoverability is super important. The way you message these things throughout the flow is really important. You can be upsells or whatever else, but have a tight line plan to land retail accounts because you'll naturally get SKU proliferation by being in wholesalers.
Do you guys have somebody in charge of this for you? Like a merchandiser? Somebody who is like, I care about how we visually display the product.
We do. We have a chief merchant. So I hired an executive on my team to build out merchandising as a function because this is just Ridge is an example. We launched 8 unique wallets in 2018. In 2023, we launched 55 wallets. So we went from basically never doing them to launching a ton. And the reason why we didn't launch any is because the product team was scared to have too much on the website. Eventually you get the brown wallet, you get the camo wallets, you get all this fucking leftover dead stock and no one will take it away because it feels like you're taking away sales from yourself. So having a merchant come in has built a safe space to launch and remove things. And we have a rule. When something comes out, something goes away, right? So there's a seasonality built in. We had to learn that. So I hired an executive to do it. But I would guess Jason has no merchandiser on his team. He has a chief probably revenue officer or a COO or someone in charge of conversion rate on the website. And I would guess Mike has a team of people doing merchandising, but I'd love to hear from you guys.
Yeah, Mike. We really have 2 teams that kind of work together, our growth team and our planning team. So the growth team is pushing on. They work with our design and marketing departments to bring new things in, but they're working hand in hand with the planning team to make sure that it's coherent and it makes sense with what we have in inventory and how much we're buying.
So this whole bit that you just talked about and what we have at Hexclad leads perfectly into a quick panzerism that I was thinking about for today. Okay. And that is adaptability. So we're often telling people on this pod that, like Sean loves to say, hey, don't listen to a word we say, right? Like we could be totally wrong. This may not apply to your business. And that's very true. A lot of what we say doesn't apply to your business. Like merchandising, this whole conversation is very retail. This is very like in-store retail focused, not D2C. But that's great because there are a lot of people who listen to the pod who do both. So there's that bit, which is don't listen to what we say. Every business is different. But also with respect to adaptability, every business changes over time. And I'm actually seeing that a lot in our business, and I wanted to share that. Last year, if you would have told me, we needed to get like some consultants in and come help us with our org structure and how we manage our teams and all that, I would have been like, go away. Don't bother me with this. Don't bore me with this. But now there are so many things in our org that we have to think about them differently as we scale, and that's that adaptability bit that kind of given ourselves permission to disagree with our old selves and have the new self. And you bringing on merchandising was an example of that, Sean. Like you were like, okay, all right, we're going more into retail. We're launching more SKUs. We need a pro to do that. And I think I'm guilty of not being very adaptable in thinking like, oh, the rules don't apply to us. We do it our way. I don't necessarily believe the conventional wisdom. And that is still holds true with a lot. But I do think this, like all of our organizations, I think one of the reasons why we are successful is this adaptability. And it's just something I've been thinking about because there's so many things changing in the Hexclad org right now. I mean, we've added so many new bodies in like the last 6 months. It's crazy. And then I went to this ICR conference, which we talked about on the last pod, and the Jefferies analyst, Guggenheim analyst, Baird analyst, they're all like, you guys need to be spending more. Like your margins are too good. You need to be spending more. And then again, is that and that's what kicked me into adaptability and saying, okay, there's a lot of things that we thought we didn't need to do, and this we're thinking now about the future state of our org, and maybe at some point we do need to think more about merchandising. We think a lot about product pricing. We think a lot about bundling.
I think bundling is merchandising, Jason. I think Hexclad does a good job at merchandising, and maybe I'll just modify what you said in this way. Like when you're talking about merchandising, if you have more than one product that you sell, merchandising matters to you. How it matters, which aspects of merchandising matter in your business, that's what you have to like listen to this as a business owner and then contextualize it to what you're running. And so I'll give a perfect example. I bought a Hexclad set of pans. I think I got the 5-pack or something. And you have a great after sell that like even once you've checked out, it comes back and says, hey, would you like to add this particular piece to your order? And you have some logic around exactly what piece you show them based on what they've ordered. And I did it. I texted you right after. I said, okay, that's very slick. It worked on me. But the reason why it worked is because you looked at what I ordered and you said, hey, he doesn't have a griddle. And griddles are the most frequently missed thing when people buy this bundle. And it was a fantastic cross sell that you pulled off for me and Cart. Even the way that you're like, how did you pick a 5-piece set? That's merchandising. Why not 4? Why not 10? Why, how did you pick the price points and the number of pieces? So I actually think Hexclad's doing, a lot of your success over the last year was that you did great in merchandising where it counted, which was figuring out how to pair your things together and the price points that worked for these big bundles. So that would be my challenge to everybody is how does this conversation, how does merchandising intersect your business? What is the number one way that growing in merchandising would help your business forward? And there's a whole lot of surface area to pick from.
So from what I heard from the Panzerism, I'm gonna give Jason a new quote. Don't let past sins, damn future self, right? Companies need to be able to understand that what they did at the time worked then and needs to change. And it could be spending more, it could be spending less, it could be selling more, it could be selling less. But just like how you change throughout your life, a company is a living, breathing thing that changes. So that's what I heard, Jason. I think it's a very prudent lesson. And what Mike just said about Jason does merchandising, he just has everybody in charge of it. That is the quote my chief merchandising officer said when he came inside our org. I'm like, we don't do merchandising. And he's like, well, you do. He's like, you just don't know you're doing it, but you're doing it. You're making these decisions. He's like, you just have everybody in charge of it. There's no system or process. You're just doing whatever your gut says. So, Jason, the easiest 20% growth you'll ever get is hiring a merchant and adding seasonality to your business. Now, it can also kill you. So it is a poison pill you have to watch, because the merchant's going to come in and say, we need 5 different types of pans that we're not making right now. We need to make them tomorrow and we need to sell them in. And the juice probably won't be worth the squeeze, but just our merchant came in, we made women's wallet colors, and we did millions of extra dollars selling wallets to women. And it's like, a double-edged sword there, but right now I'm printing the money. So really enjoying it.
Do you, at what point do you guys, I just think, Sean, does your merchandiser, just going back to the people thing, do they only focus on what you're selling? So like the assortment and the categorization, or are they also in charge of cross-sell, upsell, like where you sell it in the customer's journey with you?
My merchant is not in charge of the web experience. It is just line plan, keeping us to product expansion, and where that's placed on a channel level. So if this goes to Amazon or not.
So who owns on-site experience with how all the products show up in that obviously very important channel for you guys?
Connor, my CMO, is very involved in that. And then we have a team of e-commerce managers, web managers, and they're focused on increasing revenue per session. So even though both sides are merchandising, you could be doing merchandising on either side. We're way more focused on what we were lacking. We had muscle atrophy when it came to product releases. We were always good at like the web optimizations, but you could have merchandising on both sides. We have a web team that does the digital side. We want to thank Fulfill for being our premier sponsor. They are my ERP. I'm on their accounting module, and you'll see a tweet on screen right now from Meetab. He didn't give me permission to say this, but he's the hardest person on earth to please. If you know Meetab personally, he will text you the most minute questions. Like nobody knows what the fucking things he's asking about e-com, and he likes Fulfill. So they've been able to create a product that has the pickiest person on earth happy. I think you'll like Fulfill as well.
Like, how do we measure success with merchandising? Is it dollars per session in e-commerce? Like, it's different for in-store, by channel, but like most people listening to this are probably e-commerce. Like, is it revenue per session? Is it contribution margin per session? How would somebody like this be comped and incentivized and measured?
Do you guys have a good answer of how you judge merchandising? I think probably Mike does.
I feel like Mike will.
Here's the thing, and this overlaps a little bit with brand. What do you stand for? Does Simple Modern make luggage? Does Simple Modern make shoes? Does Simple Modern make backpacks? Like, at what point does your brand end is an important question that speaks heavily into new products and into merchandising. Just like it speaks heavily into, for each season, what you're going to emphasize and what you're going to be the story you're trying to tell the customers. And I think that the risk that we have run at times in the past, and we're getting better at this, is thinking about things through the lens of what can we sell? What would customers buy if we sold it? And that's not the right way to build a brand. That's maybe a way to sell some stuff, but that's not the right way to build a brand. The right way to build a brand is to say, what is our brand about? What space does it occupy in people's minds? How do we want them to think about us? And is the totality of our merchandising and the products we offer, does it line up with that? And when we have stepped outside of that sphere, we've had a hard time. And as long as we've stayed inside of that kind of surface area, it's been very easy to launch new products and to grow the company. And so, like we'll see examples of this from time to time where a brand will launch something and everybody will kind of scratch their heads. I mean, we haven't talked about it on the pod, but to me, this was the Solo Stove thing. Even though it's a marketing thing, like I don't see Snoop as a representation of a voice that has a lot of sway with their core market. And so it was interesting. It went viral. Like it certainly generated interest, but it wasn't necessarily effective because there wasn't necessarily alignment with their customer and the brand that they're trying to build. And merchandising is the exact same way. Are the products that you're launching, the colors that you're launching, the way that you're presenting it to the customer, is it consistent with the message of what you're trying to that you're trying to evoke in their mind and the space that you're trying to carve out for your brand?
Do we know if the Snoop ad was actually not successful? Does anybody?
I mean, dude, everyone's been debating it. I mean, we could do a quick little tangent on this Snoop ad. I almost hired the CFO of Solo. I've talked to several executives in Solo. I know Kyle from Chubby's who sold the brand to Solo. If that Snoop ad was a smash fucking hit, they still would have fired their CEO. I mean, like they missed their numbers. They were going to miss their numbers. It's what it is. So I think
that campaign was not going to bail them out. And great marketing can't fix lack of product market fit or just your TAM.
But yeah, I don't see it as that ad got him fired. I never did. I more saw it as the business was struggling and the leadership team knew that probably there was going to be a change in management coming and they threw a Hail Mary. And that's what the Snoop ad was some kind of a Hail Mary. That's the way I looked at it. And I don't know that it was terrible ad. I just think that we see what we have all learned is that there's a difference between engagement numbers or, the eye candy numbers and then the real numbers. And sometimes that gap can be like the size of the Grand Canyon. And my guess is this is one of those where there's a pretty big gap between how much it got talked about in the engagement numbers and what it actually drove to the company.
I don't think that kind of ad drives immediate term performance. And I also, Mike, I will disagree with you. I think Snoop and that ad was perfect for their actual audience.
Really?
I think their actual audience is like Yetis. I think it is middle-aged white people who fucking love Snoop. Like all of my friends have Solo Stoves and they love Snoop.
He's so overexposed, Snoop. Like I don't understand
100%.
why. I mean, he was. You go back to like my favorite movie, one of my favorite movies, Old School, right? Like they had Snoop back then, and it's amazing this guy's career. But I agree with Matt. I think it was a great ad. I think it was a great campaign, and David Herman, who most of us know and love, tweeted about this too. He's like, we have no way of knowing like the consideration period. I think long term, that was great top of funnel awareness. I think it was a great awareness play for them. I just don't think that their business could support that with their performance at the time. And so it's like right ad, wrong time for their business.
Yes.
I was interviewing the CFO in September. There was a change of management coming the entire time. I couldn't talk about it because they're a public company. And if the executive team is going to leave, the stock goes down. So with or without the ad, there's a change in management on that team.
Sure.
Yeah. And I think that's the point is like they're separate. They're totally separate things that have now been conflated in this conversation. I think this is a big tangent for the whole merchandising thing, but it's an important one because I do think look, the industry likes to talk about these things. Everybody loves a good train wreck, right? So like if a CEO of a well-known consumer brand gets fired, and I think like the whole industry has been loving to dump on public consumer companies. It's our train wreck. It's our collective industry train wreck. I just think the Snoop thing is getting conflated with a bunch of shit. And like as a brand and as an operator, I don't think making moves like that is a bad thing. I think Jason hit it. It's just about when you do it. Right.
The only point, just to take us back to merchandising, the point that I'm making is that merchandising and brand building is about drawing lines of who we are, who we're not, who we're for, who we're not, and having a strong point of view with that. And that, listen, it doesn't matter how famous certain people are, they would not be a good fit to be a spokesperson for Simple Modern. And it doesn't matter how attractive certain markets might be, they're not a good fit for Simple Modern to make a product in that market. Like, we want to do something in that market, start up a new brand. Our team can even make it, but it doesn't make sense in their Simple Modern brand. And that's the overall qualitative side of merchandising. Is you're deciding, here's what we stand for, here's who we are. And by definition, that means that you're not something. The most infuriating thing to me when you talk about brand is people are like, you know who has a great brand? Nike, Starbucks, Patagonia. They have great brands. And I'm like, if that is the extent of how we're going to talk about what makes a great brand, then you know what? We should all just hang it up and go freaking work for the government or something, because you're not going to recreate that. It's a 1 in a trillion chance you're going to create that. And it's so tired. It's such revisionist history to just say the person that survived and has gotten big, that it's because of great branding. Like, I don't want that. I want people giving me examples of companies all along the size spectrum that are doing a great job in branding.
There's a history of male-focused products being adapted to female-first audiences. Okay, so the first example is Brooks Brothers refused to make women's shirts in the 50s. They thought, women don't go to country clubs, they're not allowed, I'm not going to make shirts for them. So women bought men's shirts and created the prep style of the 50s. So that whole Ivy League style comes from women adopting men's products. And I would say Jason has done the same thing with cookware. Jason has a more gender neutral cookware brand than anyone else on the market, because it is approachable to men, and that makes him take a huge chunk of the market. Go ahead.
So
Mike.
Here's a hot take on that, because I think it's a great point. And I think it goes with your pantserism today. And Jason, you may totally disagree with this. I think you did not control Gordon Ramsay buying some Hexclad. But what you did do is, when you found out he had bought it, you contacted him and said, we'd love to talk, right? And that led to Gordon Ramsay eventually becoming a spokesperson, and an incredible spokesperson for Hexclad. And I would say him being the spokesperson for Hexclad became a framing where you could create an awesome, gender neutral, even male leaning cookware brand. But it's a good example of, even if you look at how that thing played out, like, it required luck. It required kind of serendipity of Gordon deciding to buy some to create the opening, and then you guys hit that hole hard and maximize the opportunity. And this is the way that it really works. Nobody ever gets to sit, and say, well, we're going to be exactly this, and I'm going to be 100% deterministic. It's this combination of being strategic and then seeing what happens, seeing when you get a lucky draw, and then being able to maximize that, even if it's a little bit different than what you anticipated or the way you were going to go.
Well, Mike, I want to follow up. Okay, so not only is there a history of women adopting male-first products, and you can blend gender roles and gaps and find new TAM. So if you stick around long enough, eventually your great product will resonate. And that's what Hexclad was. Gordon Ramsay didn't choose to buy just any fucking pan. He bought the best pan.
Shout out to some Northbeam and some other areas which we've been doing the work, but we saw this a year ago, how impactful TV has been for us. And I've been saying this too. It's like, a lot of people are on Facebook, but not everyone is on it. Not everyone is on Instagram. Like,
I don't even
my
think it's
controller
that, man.
and my staff accountant, I'm talking to them the other day, and they're like, because I wanted them to log into Meta to be able to check how much we owe Meta, because we went on invoicing for this period. They're like, we need to create Meta accounts to log in. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, you don't have a Facebook account? Like, no. I'm like, what? You don't have a Facebook account? You're in your early 30s, late 30s, late 20s.
Wow.
No account. So, and also I think TV just gives your brand a level of credibility and trust.
So in the
Yeah.
game of business, how I define winning is like the numbers.
Yeah.
As you would, right?
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of cookware brands that win really well, that have for a long time. So I think it's just that what you're hitting on with this adaptability thing is such a great lesson, because there are no rules that hold true always.
Well, let's jump back to merchandising, and let's talk about a couple of pretty practical things. When you're thinking about what you stand for with products, guys, how much do you let what you see competitors doing influence you, and how much do you let market trends influence you versus doing what you want to do?
Oof. I mean, we're having this conversation a lot right now at Peel a Case. I think we're going to be very driven by trends, but it's more like design trends and fashion trends, and trying not to fight those. I think I'm just like, I don't know. I just feel like I'm done fighting the macro. So like, if pink bows are in and we would have never done that as a brand before, like, we're going to at least try it. Now, the caveat to that, as we've talked about, is our inventory risk is very, very low, damn near zero when we take a shot on goal with product.
Which is such a competitive advantage. I mean, like,
it's great.
I just cannot so I'll give you an example from today, because we can't quite do that yet, Matt.
Yep.
But I'll give you an example from today. We did a Valentine's drop. I posted this in one of the chats. We did a Valentine's drop, went live at 10 a.m. You could only buy it in our app. Our biggest hour we've ever had on our website was $62,000. We had a $330,000 hour this morning on whatever this is. January the 18th, no paid spend, and it was based around a drop. And we're getting better and better at figuring out how to do these drops and how scarcity matters and how all this stuff matters. But it's just wild. I will say this, like, to your point about the macro, is we've learned, like, hey, checkerboard kind of patterns, or check patterns are really in right now. And so one of our Valentine's one was like a pink checker pattern. And sure enough, that thing freaking crushed it. And there is a point where it's like, hey, our job, how we make money, is we listen to what people want, and then we make that thing, and we do it at a really high quality, and then people pay us for that. So I'm with you. Like, there's definitely a place to qualitatively push back on things, but also, like, man, the upside is just so high when you bring people exactly what they want.
Yep. Yes. So, I mean, like, I think I'll answer the second part of the question, which is around competition. This could actually be a problem, like a weakness for us. We don't spend enough time even looking at our competition and what they're dropping and what they're releasing. And like what's hot. Like, so it's one thing to say, like, we're going to follow fashion and design trends with our merchandising strategy. But then I think it's a bit of a weakness to say, like, but we're not going to look at anybody else who sells phone cases. Well, what if they're really good at that? Right? Like, if we're because, like, who are we following then? I'm not going to follow fucking Pantone. They're not very good at it with calling the color of the year kind of thing, at least for what people like. So I find that actually really difficult to figure out, at least, and it's probably just because I'm a terrible merchant. That's not my job. And that there's people in our company who are better at that than I am. But I do find that part of the business hard, is like trying to like read the tea leaves of taste, which is what we're talking about.
What about you, Sean? I mean, you guys I think you have a unique business in that there's no direct, obvious overlapping competitor.
Yeah. So we have 1% of the global wallet market. The global wallet market is $10 billion. Yeah. We do. Our wallet business last year was over $100 million. So we have other lines of business, but our wallet business alone is over $100 million. So a little bit more than 1% of the global wallet business. So what's the other 99%? Most of it is just luxury brands doing high-end leathers that you're paying for a logo. So it's hard for us to copy them, right? To be like, you know what people really like? Black and brown squares with LVs on them. And it's like, yeah, well, they do like that, but we can't really copy that too much. So we are also trying to not follow trends. And we're trying not because we think we're above it. I would love to follow trends. We're just trying to make longer buying windows, because what we used to do is come up with an idea and try to launch it the next month. And wholesalers hate that. Your marketing team will hate you for it. Your creative team will hate you for it. So we just talked to someone from Wolverine Footwear. They have a 24-month go to market window. So they come up with a boot, it comes out in 2 years, and that's so they can sell into wholesale accounts and get pre-orders or whatever. We're hoping to get to 12 months. We're at like 6 right now. So I know it's going to come out all the way through basically August of this year. But as soon as you get to Q4, it gets a little bit fuzzy. We're just trying to get 12 months totally locked down. So less trend tracing, a stronger calendar around that. And then that's about like products we offer. What like categories do we choose to go into? I got 3 great categories right now. EDC, which is wallets and pens and watches and whatever else. We're just going to make whatever the fuck we want in EDC, whatever we think's cool. Like I own everydaycarry.com. Like we know what like people want in that category. We got rings. You don't got to make very many rings. We got black, gold, silver. We're good. And then travel. And like we're behind the ball building out a travel line. So that's the way we think about like, what to make on a merchant level. Now, what I wanted to talk about is Mike brought up the best brand. He's like, Patagonia, Starbucks, Apple, fuck you. It's like, of course they're great brands, right? I want to bring up Bic. I bring up Bic all the time because they are the best lighter, okay? They are the best pen, and they are the best disposable razor. Those 3 categories have nothing in common with each other, and everyone wants to talk about like brand cohesion and telling a story and like, being Apple in this ecosystem. Dude, Bic owns 3 categories. They do billions a year in sales, and like they're the only name in those 3 categories. So that's a great brand. And I think more people should aspire to be Bic. Like make whatever the fuck you want, just make it really good and own the category. Now, those 3 things are made of plastic. So that's the reason why they do it. They're a plastics manufacturer, right? They also they're getting into the tattoo business. If it requires plastic, they're getting into it. So that's my number 1 brand.
I hate Bic, but I think it's a great company. Yeah, man, dude, it's this again. There are no rules, right? Because Sean, I would never advise somebody to build a brand where you should just pick 3 completely disparate products and like that's your strategy. Like that's your merchandising strategy. It's like I'm going to go from shoes to making picture frames.
Is there a newer company that's done that? Is there like a more recent? Because is that just like a relic of like, hey,
I own a plastics factory.
Yeah, like 100 years ago, some guy owned a plastics factory. He's like, what else can we make? We can make pens. Okay, let's do it. Like, and then they got distribution everywhere. Like, I don't even know that anybody's like, if it's not a Bic, I'm not writing with it. Like, I just.
There is, okay, fuck you guys. There is a newer company. This is the same thing with Dyson, right? Dyson they're like, yeah, we know how to make air go in and out of things. So what can we do? Yeah. They're like, vacuums, that's a good idea. And then some other guy was like, what about hair stuff? They're like, yeah, we could do that too. The number 1 hair product of the past 2 years has been the Dyson Airwrap. So that is somebody
they do freaking hand dryers in bathrooms, which is like weird. I would think that would be like brand negative, like, hey, what do I associate you with, going to the bathroom? But like they do it, and I see them everywhere.
Yeah, it's because just like the guy who owned the plastic company who made Bic, it was just somebody who was like, yeah, like I'm really good at making air go in things and then also out of things. So we should just do all the applications. And it would be like, Mike, you should start making buckets. And people would be like, that's a horrible idea, but people need buckets. I don't know. They hold stuff. That's what you're good at, man. So let's do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, I mean, there's definitely an angle of this, which is your product assortment can just be built around a core competency with materials or function.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Look, we make stuff that holds stuff. So we hold cards and we make luggage now. We're going to make backpacks and we're going to get really good at holding stuff. That's the new Ridge company motto. And like, I think people way too romanticize this. And if you think about Patagonia, they're like, They're like, yeah, we make stuff that's warm. So we're going to get into whatever's warm. Anyway.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong, man. I think Patagonia, if you look at, now they've been around so long and their product assortment's now so wide. But for a long time, they were built around like, we make very functional things for these sports.
Yeah.
Right.
And Louis Vuitton was like, we make trunks. It's like they're good for traveling. And then eventually now we associate it with Paris and luxury and fine goods and whatever.
Yeah.
But like it all starts from a guy trying to solve a problem, having a function and going from it. And all the best brands start like that.
Yeah. I mean, that's the core. I believe that's the core of like this topic of merchandising. It's like when you think about product assortment, that is kind of what you're getting at, is like, what problems are you solving? You know, can you build a line plan and a roadmap around those problems? And that's your merch strategy. Like, you know, the underlying, you know, I'm good at, like, if you're Arc'teryx, right? Like, we're really good at this sport. That's what we do. We make jackets for people who go jump off of mountains. Great. Like, you build a brand around that.
Yeah.
My head of product development used this analogy in a podcast we did, but he was saying, you know, when Nike enters a new category, how do you think they do it? They always enter through shoes. It's shoes first, and then you expand outward, which I thought that was an interesting idea, that their lead foot is still always going to be footwear. But then obviously Nike has come to sell a whole bunch of things that aren't shoes, but they use that as the first thing kind of through the wall.
Yeah. And their core competency was, you know, for 10 years, they're like, yeah, we make shoes for people who run. And then they're like,
specifically running. Like the Jordan thing was like really a departure. They were not known as anything much more than a running shoe company.
Yeah. So just, you should stick to your core competency and then you can build out from there. I think you can build in strange new ways, right? You know, at this point, Nike's so good at rubber manufacturing, they can make tires and it wouldn't be weird. They would be like, at least to me, I'd be like, oh yeah, they can make racing tires. Like they make stuff that goes fast. They're good at rubber. Like that is the conglomerate I would build.
That's great. Okay, look, guys, my daughter and her friends just ran through the door, so I can no longer record in peace. So I got to call this episode.
All right. Later, Matt.
All right.
See you, boys.
See ya.